Hey.
Yay!
Hi, Ketchup Crew.
Hi, Ketchup Crew.
Hi, Ketchup Crew.
You made. I'm so glad you made it. It's touch and go there, but yeah. Good evening, and oh, it's time. It's time.
Oh shit!
Is it time already? Oh shit! They don't get any pre-story chat. Sorry, Ketchup Crew. That was our bad. We love you. We're sorry we didn't get to talk to you for long.
Well, as it turns out, because obviously this is the final installment, we might need to jump straight into it anyway.
Do you want to give a wee recap of where we are?
I can give a wee recap. Okay, so previously on Beowulf, Hrothgar, the king of the Halfdanit, has spent all his wealth to build this fantastic golden hall for feasting in, and wouldn't you know it, it's invaded almost immediately by the monster Grendel, who kills everyone who tries to spend the night there. Luckily for him, Beowulf arrives from across the sea with his band of warriors and vows to destroy the monster for him. Even though Grendel cannot be defeated with like earthly weapons, he boasts that he'll be able to tear Grendel apart with his own bare hands. And spoiler alert, he does. He rips Grendel's arm off, and Grendel lopes off back to the moors to bleed out. And everyone rejoices, and everything's fine, except for the following night. Grendel's mother turns up and wants to speak to the manager, by which I mean grab more warriors and drag them off to the fen and drown them and eat them. And so Grendel has to head out again and dives to the bottom of the marsh where her sunken hall is and fights her underwater. And there's also seals, weirdly enough, but like bad, scary ones. And anyway, he fights and he wins. With a special magic sword that he found down there. There's a lot of swords going around in this. I won't weigh you down with it, but yes, there's a few different swords. Actually, we'll probably come to another one soon. Anyway, now Grendel's dead, Grendel's mother's dead. Definitely everything is fine from here on out. It's always funny. It's always sunny in Scandinavia. Part 3. The hilt was handed off into the hard hands of the ring lord, a relic older than any ruler, rendered in iron by giants, and inherited, after enemies perished, by the Danish king. When the gruesome Grendel gave up the ghost, when God won over him and his mother, when that murderous pair was rendered moribund, it made sense that such a sweet piece, the smith-struck sword, would go to the prince, the loftiest lord between the salt seas, the guy who gave the greatest gifts on earth. Hrothgar considered his convictions. He handled the hilt, an ancient thing, a fossil from forgotten days, squinting at the legend left there for the literate. It was engraved with an epic that inscrutable to him, the story of how war woke in the world, and a flood brewed, drowning the race of giants, placing them beneath the waves. A punishment for others, poor, lord-lacking unbelievers, sin-soaked strangers severed from sanctuary. On the Golden Guard, the runes were written perfectly, the true name of the sword's first owner, long since Ash, for whom it had been forged. With its twisted hilt and serpent-slipped steel. There was silence until Halfdan's son spoke. A ruler who's been known as a good man since days of old, a generous, just gift-giver, a war-wielding homeland healer, is equipped to say the following. This man's as good a man as me. Beowulf, my boy, you've proven yourself in every context. Your name will be known around the world. You're steady, strong, and sure in all respects. I open my arms to you, as agreed, and fulfill the bonds of our friendship. For your people, you'll be like me, a defender and a hero. But hold up, hear me out, indulge me a moment. Hermod, that old king, was no hopeful hero to the heirs of Ecgfela, the honor shieldings. His rise was their fall. He raged, cut down close comrades, aged advisors, and when he died galled and alone, friendless though famous. God had given him grace, granted him wealth, health, and power. His road had no rocks on it. He'd known only joy. Somehow, though, his heart was not a hawk, but a drone. He bombed his own bases, denied his Danes damages, kept entrenched in combat. He commanded his kingdom's collapse and was, when ancient, loathed when he could have been loved, his life lesioned with losses. Listen to me, boy. Keep your shit straight. I've been fostered by frost seasons, fathered by time, and I'm dropping knowledge now. Here's one of the world's wonders. God is good. He's given us gifts, the capacity for clarity granted our kind. He runs the show, though, manages every aspect of existence. Sometimes he gives a man from a good clan room to roam wherever he desires, every instant filled with joy, lets him run his own kingdom and rule over boys who guard his borders, stand-up guys who die for him. God does this for so many decades that the man himself, because men in the end are fools, forgets how things work. He shirks his soul-keeping. There'll be no changes for him, he thinks, no end in sight, no loss of love or life. He wallows like a bear in honey, unstung, and nothing scares him, not sickness nor sorrow, nor does his mood darken, nor do his enemies find him, their blades sharp and stealthy. No, instead the world wends to his will. He notices nothing nasty in himself until one day everything changes. Every guard goes down eventually, sagging on the stone wall surrounding the soul. Here, while the sentry's sleeping, a sniper strikes, sending a spike into the man's heart. Now he's poisoned, selfishness searing his certainty. He's never needed to defend himself against internal threats, but the greedy orders of this beastly boss make him think the halls he's guarded, the treasures he's watched over for decades, are nothing compared to what he deserves. He hoards, hisses, hides his gold, refuses support to those who've served him. He forgets his debts, fortune's amnesiac, blacking out bounty in favor of bitterness. Turn to the end of the story, I'll wait. His body weakens, fails, falls. An inheritor crawls into his throne and passes that king's heirlooms, his protected and precious things, to anyone he wishes to woo. No regard for the dead man's worth, rituals, or requirements. Armor yourself against that kind of idiocy, my brave boy, my Beowulf. Keep yourself on an even keel, aiming your ambition at eternity instead of the everyday. Don't let avarice override intelligence. It's only a season that a young soldier's strength stays stalwart before plague or blade bring obsolescence. A crackling blaze, a rush of waves, a slippery sword grip, a spear soaring silently through the air, or even the egg of age. Your gaze will darken too, boy. Your world will dim. Death will kneel over you eventually and solicit your surrender. Hear me now. I ruled the ring dinners for 50 years, fighting adversaries, holding borders, our spears and swords against assassins of every nation, until I thought my enemies were casualties, earth emptied of them. I relaxed into comfort and fortune, and just as we celebrated our conquering every kingdom, then came Grendel. He waited in the darkness, invaded my inner sanctum with savagery, broke my spirit, and drove me into a dark depression. Thank God, thank all that is holy, I lived long enough to see you bring me Grendel's head, sword split after years of struggle. Now I can look upon it, crow, and count him a corpse. Oh, but I've gone on too long. Sit down, golden boy, heir of this hall, feast. There'll be more rewards in the morning from my hands to yours. Beowulf grinned and took his assigned seat, set by his elder king. a bench bedecked in Beowulf. Then the Danes and the Geats got down to business. The celebration began in earnest. The room was filled, and a banquet bowed the tables. Night hooded the hall and wrapped all who celebrated in starry dark. At last the companions rose. Their elder was ebbing, and called for sleep. The Geat followed suit, weary after warfare, heartsick for home, accompanied by a hall officer who led him from the company, there to tend every desire, a butler of burdens, bleaching away bloodshed and battle, packing off pain. It was no more than Beowulf deserved. He dove into dreams, as above him the hall stretched towards heaven, its gilt and vaulted ceilings shielding the hero's heart. At dawn, a black raven called out the melody of morning, the happiness of inhabiting the heavens. Sunlight snatched shadows from corners, and wayward warriors readied themselves for removal, hungering for home. Their leader was up at once, looking into the distance, his soul seeking his ship. The fierce fighter called for Hrunting to be brought, and bade Unferth receive it with thanks for the loan. He complimented its blade and said it had been a friend to him, powerful in battle. He mentioned nothing about the dullness of the edge. He had no urge to nurture a grudge. Now the warriors were ready to roll, armor on, hearts set on home. Their prince approached the dais where the king awaited, and knelt at Hrothgar's feet, confident and canny. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's own, said the proper words. It's time for us who set sail to save this king's land, to tell you we're overdue to return to our own man, Higelac. At Heorot we've been held as kin, hosted, kept comfortable, and if there's anything more I can do for you, beyond the battles I've won, any more of your heart I can win by warring, demand it. Your wish is my command. If I ever hear a whisper over the Whale Road that your walls are wobbling, that neighbors are invading, that enemies are afoot as enemies are wont to be, I'll appear with a horde of thousands and bring them to bear. Higelac may not be grey like you, he may seem young to rule, but know this, he has my back. He'll heed my call if you need help, and bring speech and sword to support me, assisting you with any needs as you would me, your new son. I'll bring a spear forest, a ferocious force should you need fighters, and if your son Hrethric should come to foster in Geatland, a Deneking's voyager in Higelac's court, he'll find friends there. Foreign shores share their secrets with those who are themselves worthy. Overcome, Hrothgar answered him, the Lord, all-knowing, put words in your mouth, Beowulf, words of love. I've never heard a boy, a man, manage such diplomacy, such propriety so easily. Your body's made of steel, your mind's mercury, your tongue gold, and if Hrethel's son should, I'm not saying he will, die in battle, a sword, spear, or sickness slaying that princely protector of your kind, and you remain alive, I'm certain with all I know that the Geats would never find a better man to be their well-won king and protector. If you should want that level of lordship, that intense responsibility. I like you more every moment, Beowulf. You've bonded two tribes. The Dennis and the Geats are at peace woven now, despite our harrowing history. We've fought fiercely in the past, but now we're friends forever. As long as I'm king.
Who lives in Mahon. So Joseph and ourselves headed out to Mahon with like car full of stuff, but I was just like, wait.
As long as I'm king of this remote place, my treasury will spill into your coffers. All that's mine on offer, from sea to shining sea. All the ships that cross will carry gifts to you. I know now what I did not before. Your people are like my people, perfect and prized, defenders of the good against the god-awful. The Danish defender dropped gold in the hand of the Geats' glory, 12 treasures more given in health and wealth, and bid him take himself to shore now, but come back any time. The old king had run out of ceremonies. He kissed his new best boy, his adopted kin, throwing his arms about his neck and weeping. Two premonitions overtook him, shaking him to the core. The stronger one, that they'd never meet again. Beowulf was so dear to him he couldn't stop trembling. But in his heart and mind's eye, he foresaw that keeping the Saviour's son nearby could only end in flame. He opened his arms. He let him go. Beowulf went forth, a golden warrior striding across green grasses. While peering on cliffs, he tallied his rewards. His ship waited impatiently on him, tugging at her anchor. All the gifts given by Hrothgar would be weighed as they went on. That was a good king, his men agreed, perfect in every way until time, robber of vaults, stole his strength and swapped it for softness. Down they marched to the shore, bright boys reveling in metal dress and battle gains, stamping in glee. The land watch took note of them from afar, as he had at their arrival, this time without rancor. He raised his hand and rode in greeting, arriving as they boarded their vessel, gifts glinting in sunlight. He announced to the assembled that the departing heroes would surely be celebrated in Geatland. They pulled the ship to sand and filled it with a king's ransom, gems and gold, horses and armor, the mast marking the spot of their treasure. They hefted Hrothgar's heirlooms whole cloth into the hold, gifting even the coast guard a sword, gold-wrapped and gorgeous, so that later he'd be able to flash it while drinking and say he'd been there when. They shoved the ship from the spit, keels splashing into salt, Denmark soon distant. Sails whipped about her mast, a veil for her sea gaze. Ropes tautened and timbers moaned. Winds surged to skip the vessel like a smooth stone across the ocean, white with foam, lifted by light, until at last the cry was heard. The cliffs of Geatland grown visible, counted, claimed, and the ship sang out for the final push, thrusting herself at the shore, shoving keel at country. Their harbour watcher was already running, waiting as he'd been for days, eyes peeled for the return of his tribe. He tugged anchor cables, moored the ship to sand, heaving her against the current to keep the waves from seducing her again. I like that line. He ordered that the holds be emptied, gold and gems, all stores and hoards, straight to shore. After that, it was only a hop skip to Helac, Hrethel's heir, and the gold would go his way, up the cliff, to king and company. The building was brilliant, the king imposing, enthroned in his home hall. Hyd, his queen, was young but shrewd. Though she'd only overwintered recently in the realm, Hera's daughter knew her duty. Open heart met open hands when it came to gifts. She paid attention, made trenchant thrift feel more generous than Lesser's overgifts. Nothing like Modthrift. Oh shit, remember her? The people's princess, an utter criminal. Bro, if anyone even looked at her in daylight, save her own overlord, she'd deal that man death. Order him bound, each shackle tightened to torture, his sentence resounding from on high, sword selection. Then the entertainment, a public flaying, arteries spurting, gore, good riddance. She may have been beautiful, she may have been royal, but can we agree here? Why the brutality? Pretty peace weavers aren't meant to claw, bringing good men down just for looking. Innocent oglers sent deathward. Talk about inflated offences. Right. Then Hemming's son became Modthrift's husband, and she shifted mysteriously. Drinkers spilt a different song, a bathroom wall graffiti shrift. Marriage mellowed the monster. She sea-changed when she was Offa's wife. Everyone liked her better. Her father had traded her, hauled her onto a ship, dowry-gowned, conveyed her from her homeland to other shores. Her nature changed when she got free of her family. She became queenly before she'd been the worst. She sat on her new throne famed for kindness, loyalty, devotion to her king. And him? Bro, obviously he was the best, a king among kings, and moreover, the greatest man who ever lived, if that's not overkill. So it's no wonder she learned morals under his hand. Offa's honoured wife as he ruled over the lands. From that duo, as proof if needed, came a good son. Eomer, grandson of Garmund, Hemming's kinsman, well met to all warriors, reliable in combat, and a keeper of comrades. Back to Beowulf, a hero himself, marching with his men across the sand, crossing the sprawling strand, the tidal flats and salted shores, making haste beneath brightness as the sky candle shone hard from the south. They hurried blur fast overland to where, rumour had it, their youthful king, killer of Ongentheow, protector of his own clans, was handing out booty in his honoured hall. That Beowulf was back was shouted man to man, so Hygelac knew it even as his warrior made his way through the gates and into the hall, walking to the king and killer captain, well and willing. The hall was cleared, and the king awaiting as our boy and his horde marched in. Hygelac greeted his warrior in formal speech, then sat down head to head with him, ready to compare notes with his returning boatman brother. Hereth's daughter waited, wafted wifely through the hall, mead jug held in her hands, caring for the companions, pouring a waterfall into cups as warriors held them high. Only then did Hygelac begin to question his comrade, calmly, commandingly, to glean the story of the war-gates, and take the tale for his own hall history. Holy hell, Beowulf, how'd it go out there? You left with hardly a word, and hide yourself, why am I doing Matt Berry? And hide yourself over water to defend a hall not your home, Herod. And Hrothgar, did you help him? We know his woes, and to be honest, I thought them insoluble. I've been warning you in advance, dreading news of your death. As you may recall, I begged you to let the Danes do their own damned dirty work. It's them who began a blood feud with Grendel, and them who should end it. Well, thank God you're home, whatever horror happened at Erod. Beowulf, descendant of Edgetow, began. I'm surprised you haven't heard what went down, Hygelac. It was proud, already written into poems. Grendel and I slammed each other into the very hall he'd been arrowing, murdering metal shieldings, ripping hearts from their holds, all of which, not to jump ahead, he got whipped into eternity for. Grendel will never have a single son to brag on his daddy's battles, to tell the tale of that night fight, no matter whether any of his awful line managed to live through a shifting civilization. Let me lay it out now. When I got to Denmark, I sped to Hrothgar's hall and presented myself, giving cred and clan. Once he knew who I was and what I'd come to do, he stationed me on a bench between his own sons and threw a raucous feast for me. I've never seen any company drunker or more delighted. Poor mead, men! The queen herself came through, that pretty peace pleader, and gave out gifts to bolster courage. A war talk for this warrior, before she snuggled up beside the king. Hrothgar's daughter, too, made the rounds, bringing beer to the highest rank, all plank arranged. Frewaru, they called, and she circled the room, offering up a studded cup. Ah, that bangle-bedecked beauty is betrothed to Froda's bereaved son, Ingeld. The Shieldings' king chose him for her husband, Hrothgar hoping, kingdom keeper that he is, that sending his precious daughter to fuck his foe's son will fix the fatherly feud, heal bitter hearts and bandage weeping wounds. But spears seldom sleep for long when a ruler's fallen, no matter how perfect the princess. We can predict how the Heathrobards will react, every loyal thane there. All will go well until after the wedding, when the young lord stands to dance and dips his Danish bride, her body dipping into a dark dowry, ancient garnets bought in blood from the Heathrobards themselves, sparkling stones stripped from beloved ghosts, ringmail wrought by their own ancestors, cherished heirlooms returning home as Danish dazzle uncredited. An aged uncle, already drunk, swaying, will shout, "Let's have a toast!" His eyes will focus on rings well known to him, triggering black thoughts of massacre. All that killing, all those spirits suddenly filling the hall. Heart-pounding, he'll sound the sorrows of his people, begin to prick the prince's conscience, seeking to stir him. To our host, and to the sword his father carried in his final battle. Oh, don't tell me you don't recognize the prime iron he died swinging that day he fought the Danes. Let me refresh your memory, boy. The day Withergild was murdered, and our heroes fell to folly. The day the Shieldings shook the field down, scavenging our dead. Now who wears your father's armor? Some assassin's son, walking into our home hall, shaking sword and status, boasting that he owns us, weighted with the wonders you yourself should be wearing. He won't stop, but will keep pressing, raising the temperature of the room until one of the Danish ladies' thanes is slain, streaked with crimson, killed for Danish deeds, his slayer sprinting out alive into home territory. This will begin it all again. Both sides, vow-bound, will break. Old thirsts unslaked, a rage rising in Ingeld, his love for Frewaru's frozen, comforts gone to curses. That's all just to say, sidebar, that the Herthobards aren't to be trusted. Their faulting friendship with the Danes, bridged only by a bride. Now, my main man, let me get back to Grendel. The story of our clash and crash, everything that happened when we two went hand to hand. After Heaven's gem slipped smoothly down to soil, he arrived, that froth-fanged foulness, that twilight tormentor, come to attack us as we gathered in silent safety in Herod. There Hanshel was fated to fall, torn from his life, first cursed on this quest. Our beloved brother was beaten and eaten, his gory grave Grendel's gullet. Let me be clear, Grendel ate him up. The attacker's teeth were bloody, his face strewn with gobbets, his body swollen with evil. And still he wasn't finished feasting, but insisted on leaving the Golden Hall with more harvest. Grendel was famous for his heft. He extended hands then for none other than Chaboy. He had a huge sack hanging from his shoulder, stitched with sinew, clasped with clever workings crafted of twisted dragon skins. Grendel knew nothing of us, but this wrath wanderer wanted to stuff Beowulf and his boys into that sack, abduct us. That shit wasn't happening. The moment I stood to face him, my rage evident, Grendel was a goner. I'd be talking too long if I got into every detail of the battle, how I paid him in pain for wrongs done to Danes. Suffice it to say, I won you honor, my king, and the Geats as well. Even though Grendel got loose and lived, suckling at survival's sweetness a little longer. His right arm stayed in Herod, holding the door, amputated, and he limped anguished to the mare, where he dove and drowned in despair. The Dane Lord rewarded me for my life risking with piles of gold and heaps of heirlooms once the sun was up. All of us at table, primed for entertainment, singers and story slingers. An ancient shielding steeped in the history of his people told tales of the early days. Sometimes one of the men touched harp-strings, recounting his life story, and other times the king himself offered up an awesome riff, while in turn the grimmest among us, scarred and wizened, would hobble up to tell of boyhood battles, and then shift to songs of old age, overcome by emotion, silvered heart aching for the good old golden days. We reveled indoors for hours, joyful and united, until nightfall came stalking us, a shadowy reaper. Uninvited she appeared, a dame made of damage. Grendel's mother, slinking out of the dark, formatted for fury, avenging her son and bringing ruin back to the room. Grief and death theft had possessed her, and she came to find the Geats who'd found her Grendel. She marched for blood, rebel warrior entering private premises, and captured a counselor, Aesir, the king's closest and wisest. In the morning there was no body to burn, no corpse, nothing at all to call back his memory and smoke. nor limbs delight for love. She'd borne his flesh away and hidden it in the darkness under the mountain and rushing waters, her mere morgue. Hrothgar was broken by this blow, worse than any other, his scars reopened by razors. The king begged me, yes, begged, and he named you too, to go after her, to pursue her underwater to avenge his loss, and if I did it, to gain even greater glory. He named his price, and it was done. Into icy waters I went, diving deep to meet my match, and found her raging. I took her, and she took me too, hand to hand, woman to man, water roaring red, splitting the current with colour, until at last, in her own hall, I beheaded Grendel's mother with a sword too substantial for anyone else's swing. I barely left with my life, and only that by fate's choice, but when I returned to the surface, Halfdan's heir, bearer of men, gave me a stocked store of his own hoard, gifts golden and godly. Thus Hrothgar acted as ever he has, paying me for my sacrifice and more, letting me set my wages in goblets and goods. From Hrothgar's heirlooms comes Hielak's inheritance. I've brought these gifts to you, your majesty, and I give them willingly. You're the man I seek to impress. I've got no other family left, none close. Your kindness is my comfort. Beowulf called for the boar's head standard, the battle-crested helmet, the grizzled grey mail shirt, and the ferocious war sword, and wrought an account of their provenance. When Hrothgar gave me all these precious things, brilliant leader, he bade me bring you words as well, to explain why their favours fit for kings. He told me this had belonged to his older brother, King Haeregar, but he kept it locked away, never giving it over to inheritance, not even to his own son, Heroerd, despite his worthiness, despite his loyalty. Now it's yours to bear in health. Bro, here's what I know. 4 horses were brought in next, presented to the king. Beowulf bestowed those bays, along with their armour, each one an impossible gift of blood and girth. This is how it should be between birthkin. No plots, no plans for plunder, no conspirers crafting catastrophe, no one sculpting death where life should be. The warrior king, Beowulf's uncle, was lucky to have the loyalty of his nephew, and he carried Beowulf's burdens in return. I heard Beowulf brought here to the golden torque gifted him by Wealhtheow, and with it 3 horses harnessed similarly in gold, sleek and graceful. The queen wore her reins well, her breast radiant with heroic history. Thus did Beowulf bring his bravery to bear. He battled like a brawler, but could hold court with kings and queens too, never punching down, never mocking drunk comrades, never locking himself in combat with those whose strength couldn't stand. He kept his stones controlled, and when he rolled only with equals. Mind, he hadn't had this status when he left, a boy who men looked on as low. The Geats thought him lazy, and even their lord had never given him span on the beer bench, believing he was all bluster, no badass, thinking his position came from privilege, not class. But now, everyone who thought Beowulf was just a wayward boy got taught. The king, warbringer, protector of men, ordered Hrethel's heirloom brought in, and that splendid sword, gem-clotted, the best by far in the treasury, he lay in Beowulf's lap. Then more, he gave his man 7,000 hides of land and a hall of his own into which he could place his throne. They both already had land from their fathers, ancestral sway, but now a better way. Land came from Hielik to his new right hand, Beowulf. Later days were cloudier. A war began. Hielik was dead by then, his shield yielding no safety for his son, Heardred, against the war-wired Shilfings, who patrolled hunting for the young Geat king. They found him, surrounded by his soldiers, slew them, and after that, boys, well, you know. The rings rolled down to Beowulf. He caught the kingdom he'd rejected and held tight to it for 50 winters before he too found himself an old man, the grey guardian of Geatland. Across a star-studded sky, in deepest dark one night, a dragon ranged, unchecked. She was a scar-skinned warrior, long accustomed to shadow soaring by moonlight, defending her claim, hoarding in her own high hall. No man knew the way into the dragon's cliff-top cocoon, but a thief stumbled through a split in the stone and retrieved a gem-glistening goblet. He robbed her of nothing else, just the cup. But up she rose, raging, grieving, though to cry out was to confess she'd been stripped while sleeping. This country, these creatures, would feel her fire. The instigator hadn't intended to ignite Armageddon. He'd merely slunk into a cave and found a crypt. This slave, seeking safety from a miserly master, became the spark that smoked a primeval monarch out. He spelunked into yawning dark and gripped a wall. Instead of clammy stone, he felt a kiln. Instead of granite, gold. Whose forbidden hold was this? What had he provoked? He wrapped trembling fingers around the first small, shining thing he found and fled. For the vault was more than a treasury. Piles of preciouses nested beneath the coils of a snoring serpent. It was a bed. Bro, no one living knows the name of the lost soul who'd interred those spoils long ago, burying the grave goods of a wealthy grace. Death had snatched them all into a sack and lifted them out of existence, leaving only one, this ghost custodian, mourning over friends, family, foes alike. He had no future for himself in mind, nothing but a dead end. Left with only this haul of tomb treasure, nothing to spend it on, no joys left to consume, he attempted to wring pleasure from his stint as the richest man alive. There was a barrow already built, high on a headland above the sand, secured by waves against trespass. The last man climbed the slope, carrying his collection, all the things worth saving, all the wonders he could find. He organized the bounty, performing final rites. Hold these, Mother Earth. Men have lost their grip. We mined this metal from you, forged it for fighting, ruined ourselves warring against one another. Man by man we gave our souls over to spite, lives flashing before our eyes, farewells to all our hopes. I'm alone here now, no sword bearer, no cup keeper, no hall sweeper. My flocks float south without me. This hard helmet will lose its filigree. There's no polisher waiting to keep our battle masks gleaming. Everyone once waking now dreams. This breastplate endured many battles, bruised by blades, smashed by shields. Now it'll be red dust, along with its owner. Metal shells rest here without their warriors. Now there are no heroes, no soothing music, no harp, no hawk soaring through all, no swift horses trampling green grass. We existed. Now we're extinct. And so the last survivor mourned, making his way from emptiness to emptiness, listing his sins one by one, wandering the world woefully until death came welling in to wash him from the rocks. Afterward, an ancient collector soaring through the starry hours happened past and saw a golden glyph from above, a flame-tongued one who sought out strongholds as she scourged, a slip-skinned dragon, tagging the sky with flaming sigils. Farmers kept vigil, dreading her smoky signs. She was hungry for hoards, tempted by temples, and every burial site was known by her to hold heathen hopes, howling for a new owner. There she dwelt, this nameless fear, for 300 years, padlocking her hall with all her limbs until the infiltrator infuriated her. That slave skittered to the owner's home with the stolen goblet and gifted it to get mercy. Thus, the hold of the old gold get was known, her vault catalogued, her ring hoard run, for the master clocked what he was looking at, a treasure protected by time. At once the dragon woke, choking on fury. She huffed her hoard, winding herself around it, revulsion kindling within her, the sour scent of an enemy man, the footprints of a plunderer who blundered past her sleeping skull and seen her secret dreaming place. We all know stories like this one. A man unmarked by fate may sometimes cloak himself in God's grace, passing close to monsters unbeheld. A hoard holder fine-toothed to the ground, fire foraging for the man who'd invaded her bedchamber. Wide she circled, planning his disemboweling, claw-mapping every inch of wilderness, though no man there to catch. She imagined a wild battle, flexed rapturously, then undulated into her lair to hunt again for the missing cup, only to rediscover the telltale evidence. Someone had desecrated her delights. Teeth gritted, she ticked until nightfall, that guardian of old gold and haunted history. Her urge toward murder more intense by the moment. Eventually, ecstatic, she outlasted the light. Into darkness she emerged and put the world on blast, roaring into the sky, a comet of catastrophe. Villagers in the vicinity felt her attack first, their lands blackened, but soon it would be their lord and treasure-giver suffering. The dragon swooped low and spat flame, destroying both manor and hovel, scrawling red RSVPs in the sky. The winged ringer had no time for survivors. She skywrote her grievances, then rewrote them roughly in land fire from end to end of Gairt realm, her scaly helm shining as she sang insults from the clouds. Back to her ridge she whipped as the sun showed itself, slithering into her gold stock, locking herself away. She'd exhaled upon their ground, and now they burned black blood. Ah, she slept, trusting in human frailty to keep her lair unmolested. That trust would turn to dust, like everything. Soon Beowulf received a blistering missive. His own hall, his heart home, had combusted. He'd been ghost-throned by the sky-born gold-holder. To the good man, this region's ring-giver, this was distress unbearable. Punishment, perhaps, from the Lord. Unjust? He worried, waited. Had he broken old covenants? Unwarded his soul? Doubt dawned as he considered deeds long done. Sins kept secret. He wasn't used to feeling insecure. Meanwhile, the fire drake raked coast to coast with claws, charred gilded Geatland without pause, crimson blazes and black billows, until the old war king woke to action, plotting vengeance on the stranger. The foremost warrior projected for his own protection a myth-worthy shield made entirely of iron. He knew no forest gift could defend him. His safety lay in smithy. Linden couldn't withstand lightning. Though Beowulf didn't predict he'd die in this fight, he and the dragon both, he'd always known that fate could fuck a fighter up, no matter the hoards he'd held, no matter the luck he'd had. The ring collector was too proud to bring a war band, to march an army against the firmament flyer. His plan would be his pyre. He imagined the dragon a dimwit, clocking neither her courage nor her grit. I mean, he had for years been up in it, persevering through pain and danger. Countless grim battles since he had saved Hrothgar and Heorot, since he'd rushed Grendel and all his kin, knocking that damned family to the mat. One of the worst of those hand-to-hand hells had been the one when Hygelac, Geat King, closest comrade, perished in Friesland. His skin became sheath for a sword, his skull a cup overflowing with blood. Beowulf saved himself only by swimming, fleeing the massacre by sea, bearing back as he swam 30 suits of armor torn from corpses he created. The Hetwar had no joy of him, hiding their heads beneath their own splintering linden as Beowulf ground them into cold sand. Few saw home again. Solitary, salt-scourged, he swam screaming over open ocean, Ecgtheow's son repatriating grief-stricken to his own land. He had tried to quicken him with the throne, offering him gold, gemstones, a potent position, a life less lonely. Her own son she didn't trust to govern, to keep borders, trust against deploying hordes, now his daddy was dead. She couldn't convince Beowulf to step over Heardred, nor consent to come to her bed, but instead he offered his counsel to the boy king until he was man enough to rule the Weder-Geats himself. Soon thereafter, exiles appeared over the Salt Highway. Othier's sons, who'd raised a coup against their old wave king, Onla. He was the ruler of the Shieldings, had given gold from his kingdom seat, was master of their mead hall. Heedless, Heardred received the refugees and traded his life for it, his reception repaid in regrets. A fatal flash of Onla's sword, and Hygelac's line was ended. The Swede king, satisfied, set off to the briny boulevard, and Beowulf, bereaved, ascended the Geat throne, in grief, never surrendering his reluctance to become the ruler. That was a good king. In later days, our man paid the killers and kills, avenging his dead prince by befriending Eadgils, the last of the Swedish rebel sons. Beowulf sent him an army of sea-born swords and tied a scarlet ribbon around the blood feud, exterminating Onla. And so, Ecgtheow's heir inherited a complement of king's qualifiers: dangers rare, treasures tragic, constant proofs of courage, excelling at every impossibility. Until the day came for him to kill the dragon. The Geat King rode with 11 companions, firing himself into fury as he hunted the lair's location. By then he'd found the smoking gun, the embezzlement that had stoked the dragon's rage. The gilt cup had been brought to him by the burglar who'd begun this, and that thief, on life tilt, became the 13th man, rife with regrets, compelled to guide an expedition back to the scene of his crime. The unwilling guest of the king led the rest, in safety of daylight, to the hide he'd strayed into, a golden grave near salt shoals and trembling tides. Piled inside like scales were mounds of etched metal, detailed by the dead, along with a veteran guardian who now never slept. She was the sole barrier to entry, but burrowed beneath the earth as she was, there was no simple way to bring death to her den. The old king fell to his knees on the cliff point and willed good fortune upon the Geats he'd ruled, those who'd sat fireside warmed by his gold. Stricken, suddenly unsteady, he foresaw his fate in the fog, shrouded but certain. For a moment he felt for his old foes, fen-bound, embarking alone. Soon, his own lease would expire, evicting him from hall, hearth, and home. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's own son, manned up, mastered himself, set it straight. I lived whole lives in my youth, endless combat, great wars. I remember every moment, even now. When I was 7, My father sent me out to sleep in the king's house. He dropped me on a new daddy, King Hrethel, who kept me safe, opened his hands, treated me, a fosterling, like his own sons. Never was I less dear to him than Herebeald, or Hastian, or even my best-loved Iarlac. The eldest, Herebeald, tumbled into an early grave, done in by his brother. Hastian tugged his bone bow, flinging a missile that missed the mark, sharp-toothed his sibling's heart, a bloody thorn. There was no way to mourn for him, no vengeance to be had for what could mitigate the blame. Who was left to shame for this heart-thieving? Nobody. It's the same sort of sorrow when a man outlives his son, sees him climb the gallows and swing, sentenced justly for crimes against the king. The father hollers out a sob to rapturing ravens, witnesses his boy swallowing dust, unable to plead his case. No settlement in silver can buy a child back from the gods of air. The father awakens, disgraced, in despair thereafter, knowing his inheritors been erased. He has no verve, no urge to visit beds, no wish to father a new son, now his firstborn is dead. He stares in sorrow at his child's empty room, hears the dreary wind that habits there now. His hall is silent, cheerless, hungry, hearth without coals, riders sagging in their saddles, heroes hidden, where once singers sang and harps were fingered, where a yard full of sons were brothers. Abandoned on earth, left to live alone, with only sins to number, the grey king retreats to slumber, moaning dirges. What son? What wife? What life? What song? This was Hrethel, after Herebeald was dead. He couldn't bait the killer with blood feud rules, nor hate him for his wrongs. The murderer was not his preferred son, but still, he was next in the now blurred line. Hrethel walked away from the world, losing the plot, heart-tortured, stone-faced. He marched alone into the flickering light of God, leaving what he had left to leave, bones, strongholds, and cold sod to his sons, as a rich man must. That old man was dust, but his wars remained. Swedes and Geats got in each other's faces and fought ferociously. Hrethel dead, dark desires rising. Ongentheo's sons banded together, full of war wrath. On and on they came, keeping no peace from overseas, but twisting knives and words into ambush at the hill of Hesas. My own killer king avenged that. Sing it with me, you all know the story. But there was a cost. We lost Hastian, Guildlord, in that bloodbath, and Iarlac, my own Iarlac, drew his sword the next morning. He brought it down on Ongentheo, his brother's slayer, splitting his helmet, sending the old Swede to his death, drained, the dirt drinking his blood. Even his leathern fists, feud fortified, failed in fending off his fate. And me, I fought to repay the rings Iarlac gave me. Sword swift, debts edited in red. He gave me greensward, rolling hills, a home of my own. He had no need to seek any superhero among the Githas, Swedes, or Spear Danes, no hired merc to secure his six. I was always there, his constant companion, marching ahead, first to charge. I was the soldier who kept my king shredding, the warrior who kept his queen wed. I was his man, until, well, I'm not dead yet. I'll lead while taking my last breath, as long as this sword stands by, even if I have to end with death. It's been my second in every battle, since the very beginning, when I slew Derthrin, the Huas warrior, in a duel before both our armies. He brought no horde back to his ring lord, that flag waver, but instead fell bravely, not to my blade, but to my boldness. I wrung that man to death, my fists deep in his ribcage, my hands in his lungs, his bone vault broken. Now I'll use all I have, sword, fists, sharpened edge, honed heart, to engage the snake for this gold heap. Beowulf blasted his last boast. I laid down my life on the daily when I was your age. Now, Grey Guardian though I am, I'll show you how it's done. I'll kill this creature if it's the last thing I do. If it's no coward, it'll come out of its cave and face its challenger. He eyeballed each of his men, power-privileged warriors, for the last time. I'd go in without weapons, as I always have if this weren't a dragon. I'd do it like a man, kill it barehanded like I killed Grendel so long ago. But mortal skin can't contend with a flame-spitting fiend, and so I go in sword-armed, taking shield and mail shirt. I won't surrender when I see the beast, but fight it by the wall, and God will dictate which brawler wins. Get a good seat, boys, and look to the sky. Your job's to watch this flyer fall. I'm decided, don't defy me, I've no more shade to throw on this serpent raider. Let the winner win, let the loser get bent. My men, stay here atop the barrow. Wait with your war weapons, watch and see who wins. Who can suffer more, who can be worse wounded, who can survive fire. This is my fight. I don't ask for intervention. None of you are strong enough to take this thing, to try and stake your manhood on doing a dragon. I'll be the one winning the gold, my bravery the broadest, and if not, boys, this'll be the battle that breaks your king. Beowulf stood tall, his iron shield upraised, armored in his own fame, his helmet, his mail shirt, his faith firm only in fate, a grit god bearing brute weight beneath the rocky ledge. No trembling in his hands, but a strong salute. He'd survived worse than this, a veteran of foreign wars, of battle betrayals, of heartbreak, flung himself from cliffs over and over, surfaced singing. There, a stone arch, and there a stream rushing from the barrow's entry, a boiling geyser, furious fumes and flames. No one could live long in there, not without burning. Beowulf knew he couldn't fight inside the horde lair. The dragon's heat was horrific. He worked his wrath into a roar. The main man of the Veda Geats bellowed into the blast zone, calling forth his foe. Under the stone, warmth turned to war. An echoed challenge bounced, and the dozing dragon lifted her head, alert with fury. A human voice. Oh, there'd be no negotiation, no settlement in metal. Fire walked first, dragon's breath surging out of the stones. Earth quaked as she rose and roared in return. The challenging mortal raised his shield as she emerged, a whipping wraith, a coil convulsing overhead, fangs, claws, and scales railing against robbery, ready for war. Beowulf's sword was already drawn, that razor edge, that razing heirloom. Each of them living was intolerable to the other, and in fury they fell to it. Feet planted, the people's provider held firm behind his shield, even as the serpent swirled, twisted and unfurling, her scales flame-swathed. Flinging herself hard at fate, a flexing firework aimed straight at the king. His shield shirked its duty, keeping him safe for only moments. The famous warrior was, for the first time, naked. Another first. Beowulf had never before been quarry, God snubbed, fate forsaken, his glorious premeditated victory unwritten. The Geat Lord raised a sooty fist and punched in panic at armored scales, as his sword slid, twisting against stony bones, his fang useless against volcanic dangers. It dawned on the king that he was afraid. His weapons forged without sorcery, his defenses all man-made. The horde guard rippled in rage, her mouth a fusillade of flames, so furious was she to feel even the dullest blade. Her war lanterns lit. Beowulf knew better than to expect victory. His sword unmatched until this hour, splintered where it should have slain. His ageless iron had never been conquered, but now Ecgtheow's son found himself engaged in epic, loaded into a rattling cart and exiled to a darker country, though unwilling to go easy in the loss of long-held longing. Everybody's got to learn sometime. Back at it again, the two battled furiously. The dragon renewed, rapturous, inhaling, uncoiling afresh. The man who'd been king was wreathed in flame. He knew his end was near. No one was coming. No seconds running to serve or save him. No ring-raised warriors. Those men, that former family, were sprinting from his screams, racing for safety off the barrow and into the trees. But one man felt something, a bond that bound him back. He was kin and could not leave his king to die alone. His name was Beowulf, and he was Wechson's son, that righteous warrior, that Shilfing kinsman of Erfir. Beowulf watched his king writhe beneath the heat of his flame-battered helmet, remembering the rings that king had given him, his comfortable home among the Vegmanlings, his halcyon hoardings and heritage come down from his daddy. He could not run with the rest. He raised his linden shield and lifted his sword, a blade with lineage of its own, a weapon come from Edmund, Alfea's son, that exiled friendless one that Wechstan had killed in combat. He'd borne his victim's arms back to the dead man's kin, his engraved helmet, woven chainmail and sword, giant forged. When Ella returned the gear, ring gift to a kin-killer, though slain Edmund had been his nephew. Wechstan held the hostile horde for the rest of his life, helm, sword, shirt, until his son came of age and needed metal to prove his worth. When he was dying, grey and aged, embarking into the unknown, he showered Beowulf in battle bounty he had witnessed. Now was the young warrior's first chance to align himself with his lineage, to fight for his father and for his ring lord. He had a strong spirit, and his inheritance was sharp as ever, a thing the serpent would learn when soon they met. Repulsed at their reluctance, Beowulf sought to convince his companions. "Bro, listen! Remember in the mead hall we swore to our lord that we'd stand by him. Swore to our ring giver we were worth his investment, that we'd bleed in our battle gear, given us for fighting, not strutting. He favored us from among the flock, gave us gifts, called us more than just mill-run warriors. I know he insisted he climb this hill alone, the head of our country, the best of men, but it's time for us to defy him. Get in the zone, he's falling. Do we watch him drop? No. Do we wait for his heart to stop, for him to die? No. Beowulf needs backup. On attack. Let's save our savior from those flames. I'd rather burn in a pyre alongside my ring giver than run home, arms untested against any enemy. My God, hear me. It beggars belief that we wouldn't even seek to slay this serpent, that we wouldn't try to tear our prince from its teeth. Men, I know if you don't, he deserves better than dragonfire, undefended by his own. We're sworn to go together. No? Well, then I'm going in alone, though my sword's nothing next to its skin. I'll bring my king, my shield, helmet, shirt, and sword." He sprinted through fire, appearing armored alongside his lord, shouting, "Beowulf, I'm beside you. You'll dare to risk it all and fight to the finish, as you did when you were young. You won't be bested while your heart beats. Your fame won't diminish. Your history's here. Be strong, my king. Jaboy is with you in this fight. Be your country's shield. as I battle on your right. The dragon stanched any imminent surrender in herself. Her wrath rekindled her own unearthly serpent song. She brought forth fire, blasting it at those nuisance humans, filthy, false-scaled, and intrusive. She scintillated sword and shield, flash-burning Beowulf's lindenwood to ash. His mail shirt was like linen to her, so he ducked under his kinsman's shield, still fighting. His king shared that steel umbrella, once the young warrior stood beside him, showered in sparks. Invigorated by the thought of victory, the king used all his strength to strike, lunging at possibility. Naegling was the victim of the swing, snapping like a straw. Beowulf's blood-tested blade was wrecked by dragon skin. It was not a man's weird to be assisted by sword, no, not by sharp edges, nor ancient iron, and his grey blade gave way under too strong a swing, shattered by too straight a stroke. Beowulf got no win from that weapon. The third round sounded. The fire breather rallied, rocketing from her corner and diving at that warrior, driving needle fangs into his throat, shaking him like a captured flag. Beowulf went limp, his body wound-worn, drenched in his own dark lifeblood. Here's what I know. Beowulf, Wixton's son, saw his king collapsing and showed his bloodline's bravery and Geat-born grit. His fighting hand was singed as he dodged the dragon's head, but he drove lower, spurning safety to split the serpent's stomach with his ogre-edged sword. With that blade in her belly, she couldn't belch flame. Her fires sputtered. Now Beowulf, with his last strength, drew a dagger from his hip, a lethal hunting thorn, and dipped it into the dragon's side, wounding her fatally. Blade met body, a bleak and bitter fight. Together, these two slew their foe, courage conquering flight, and that duo, kin by blood and bone, did it side by side. Every warrior should step up to serve his lord, throw down regardless of odds. This was the last battle for the king, though. His final victory a grim one. The old warrior's wounds wept the dragon's legacy, scalding spit set by poison fangs seeping into sepsis. Beowulf knew he was a goner. His chest heaved with each heartbeat. He slumped against the wall, doomed but dignified, admitting defeat, easing his broken body down. He fixed his eyes on the stone of the hall, arches curving over tall columns worked in an age before he'd lived, by giants long gone under. And his new battle brother, better than any of those others, hand-washed his king's wounds, serving sweetness even in this sorry state, unhelming him, bathing him, bringing him peace. Beowulf spoke, mortally wounded. Despite the doom diminishing his light, he unlocked his word vault. His time was waning. His brain was all he had left. In it, an ultimate ring gift to bequeath. Death drew close and knelt beside him. If I'd ever had a son, I'd be giving him my armor now. But I never fathered one, never gave my blood to an heir. And so this death is final, and the last of me. I've been ruling here, fearless, for 50 winters. I was the man. No neighbor came to war. My name kept enemies at bay, and no one could scare me. I lived in peace and released my lease on battle, knowing I had nothing to prove. I wasn't ambitious, never threw shade, never took shit, never spat curses when I felt wronged, but sat on the throne and weighed my people's woes and wishes. I have to say, I did okay. Now, As I lie dying, doomed by dragon, no one can claim I was a bad king. God can't call me a murderer, for I slew none of my kin. My boy, get a move on and bring your lord's last request. I want to see what prize I won of this. Beowulf, go under that stone, past where the dragon lies, wickedly wounded, her treasure targeted and taken. Climb into her hoard and count my gold. Hurry, I want to hold it. I want to know what I did, to look at my winnings, my gilded gifts, the grave goods of a gone people. I want to know it was worth it. My dying will be easier if I see what I died to do. Garner a giant's treasure in exchange for my life. I'll let go then of all my holdings, my throne, my carefully guarded bones. Bro, here's how the story goes. Wextan's son went directly, obeying without question the command of his dying king. Still dressed in heavy vines of mail, he ran to bring his man satisfaction, ducking below the stony ledge into the barrow. He was victorious, battle-brightened, and saw with shining eyes a trove of hoarded heaven, riches beyond compare, tapestries, piles of gold heaping the floor. That old moon-splicing serpent's lair was full of ancient pitchers for pouring peace, goblets, cups, corroding without women to offer them up, helmets red with rust, artfully twisted armbands without arms to hold, and oh, all that old gold, so long concealed, so long inviolate, wriggling back into the earth, despite the designs of those who'd hidden it. Beowulf spied a standard too, entirely woven of gold, suspended on the wall over the rest, more delicately wrought than any cloth he'd seen, glowing with illumination of its own, lighting the cave so he could inspect, itemize the collection, imagine it emerging. The dragon was gone entirely. No sign she'd ever slept there, done to death by dagger and driven into darkness. Then, so I'm told, that man plunged his hands into the hold, that ancient hoard of giant's gold, and filled his arms with feast gifts, plates, goblets, anything, everything his heart desired, taking also the standard, dragging the dragon's lantern down from the wall. I mean, bro, the dragon was dead. The old king's swing had made that certain. The one who'd guarded the glitz, who'd shown her love by littering the land with abandoned homesteads and burnt beds, who'd made midnight her inferno hour, she'd been split into serpent skin. Beowulf made haste, driven by the treasure he carried, hoping his lord would still be living, though he'd been forced to leave him high and dry. He returned, arms full of bounty, to find his king bleeding out, pools of red, letting go of life. Beowulf fell to his knees to drip water on the king's lips. The old man tried to speak, and the knife tip of a sentence stabbed from his locked lung vault. He stared at the gold, sorrowing. And I guess we need to come back tomorrow night for the epilogue.
Epilogue tomorrow.
I guess.
Yay. Do you want to do the remove spotlight thing?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I got it.
Oh, you got it.
Thanks, friend.
Thanks, man.
Sorry.
Thanks for reading, friend.
Sorry that ran on a bit. I thought we might be finishing it up tonight, but no.
What's the thing with the rings? Like they're all talking about like their ring lord and stuff.
Right. So like an arm ring was like a golden way of like, in the same way that an armband generally signifies that you're like part of a group. An arm ring would signify that like you belong to the person who gave this to you. Like you're one of their best boys.
I did not know that was what an armband meant.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly like the phrase "doing your dragon." That was extremely bad dragon of you. Also, I really want to watch the 13th Warrior now.
Yes, there are so many bad Beowulf movies.
And I'm also really, really getting the vibe of like, this is what Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings was based on with the dragon stuff.
Yeah.
And the like formalizing this is what a dragon is, this is its weak spot, like
Also Scrooge McDuck's money bin. That's basically, I think, where it comes from. Is ultimately from Beowulf, weirdly enough.
like, I'm dying, but at least I've got a lot of gold.
Yeah.
Okay, guy.
Why don't we tell the man what he's won?
You're still dead! Hooray!
Bro.
Bro, tell me I look cool.
I'm not gonna lie, there was a good chunk of time there where Bracken and I were just mouthing bro at each other. It was so
I love that Beowulf dies with the last words on his lips, just like carrying all like ridiculous amounts of gold jewelry, just being like, Gucci gang.
Gucci guy.
Like, he's the most tacky motherfucker. Absolutely.
Yay, I snuck in and then I had you on mute so I can catch up properly.
No
I
worries.
thought I'd come and see everyone's faces.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello, Secret Michael.
I'm afraid
It's
that
just that.
away.
Night, Ian.
Yeah.
I love how, like, there's just bits that tell you, like, about a completely different value system, I guess. Where, like, I really, like, I love that bit where, like, he has a sense of his own doom briefly. And it's like, well, I had a good life. I think, maybe? Was I good? I hope I was good. Like, that's a very relatable thing. But then also to be like, I'm slain! Quickly, fetch my decorative plates! Like,
Rory, that was so good. And I can't remember what he was doing on the daily. There was just doing it on the daily in there, and I just cracked the fuck up.
yeah, it's an amazing translation, isn't it?
It's such a, like, it's so much more accessible than I worried it would be.
Mm.
Yeah. Like, you can keep track. I know you can see where Tolkien gets the, like, meandering side plots from. But, like, you can still follow it really well. It's cool.
And the language doesn't feel gimmicky, and I think when it was sold to us as like a Beowulf translation that starts with the word bro, it felt like maybe it would feel a bit gimmicky, but it doesn't,
like
because there's so much like beautiful language in it, and it like intersperses really well.
Yeah, like, I know what you mean. Like, I was like, oh no, is this going to be like the Extreme Teen Bible?
Jesus.
Then the Lord and his posse went down to Nazareth, where there was an empty, and but they were all out of crunk juice.
Yeah, I really enjoy the balance. You
Are you
going,
going,
Katie?
Katie?
Can I run away and look after my Nick because he's not
Should we
feeling great?
Oh no. Shall we say
Give him our
goodbye to the
regards.
catch-up crew?
Good
Yeah.
call. Good night, catch-up crew.
Hey,
May
catch-up crew.
your deaths not be at the hands of dragons. May you always have like a good ass sword that doesn't break.
May your deaths be at the hands of dragons and be fucking glorious.
Yes.
Okay?
May someone live to tell the tale.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, catch-up crew.
Hi everyone.